Hello, my name is Adeolu Koforade and I'm a third year political science major. My pronouns are he and him. My film analysis will be on The Women Are Coming, which is a CBC documentary by Karen Wells. The Future Pro Choice Discourse in Canada by Gordon and Surrett will be the main supporting reading, with ideas incorporated from articles on Asian communities for reproductive justice, titled a new version for advancing our movement, as well as Crenshaw's reading titled Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex. Okay, so this slide is just a quick rundown of major concepts that will be discussed in this presentation. We will look at a quick summary of the documentary, as well as take a deeper look at the abortion caravan. We will look at defining and compare both reproductive rights and reproductive justice, as well as analyze intersectionality. We will look at specific examples like like the abortion caravan, Margot Dunn in the documentary, as well as the short video about Mrs. G and her child. Lastly, we will discuss why this is a topic of significance in the world and why I chose the topic. I will be using a quote by Kimberly Crenshaw to supplement my thesis statement. Any analysis that does not take intersectionality into account cannot sufficiently address the particular manner in which Black women are subordinated. With the significant rise of social justice in recent times, I believe this documentary is only the scratching surface of the deeper issue that concerns women's control over their bodies. I argue that the caravan and fight for reproductive rights is a good stepping stone to tackle the biggest concept, which is reproductive justice. As seen by the quote above, an understanding of intersectionality needs to be obtained in order to comprehend social justice. This slide is just to provide a quick summary of the important points that were brought up during this documentary. So it all started in Simon Fraser University, where students were known to make speeches and protests for the changes they were fighting for. They formed the Vancouver Women's Caucus, where they shared the same frustrations in the university and gathered together to express their thoughts and look for a solution. What really aided the gathering of these women was because the student movements, with its calls for free speech, student power, and equality, had only men for leaders. Women's movements in Canada were not taken seriously at the time, so women planned to travel across Canada, bringing in thousands of women along the way in hopes of shutting down the House of Commons in Ottawa and voicing their frustrations. This was all known as the abortion caravan. The documentary states that their goal was aimed at putting the issue of abortion access on the national agenda. The caravan had a plan to get women into the House of Commons and chain themselves to their chairs. The main point of the whole documentary was their fight for basic reproductive rights. 35 women with chains in their pockets infiltrated the House of Commons. They shackled themselves to their chairs and started to shout during question period. This was the first mention of the caravan in the documentary. However, it took these women many steps before reaching the House of Commons. As mentioned earlier, it started with the Vancouver's Women's Caucus at Simon Fraser University. They needed to come up with a plan to take action on abortion rights and make their voices heard. They elected to send a letter to women's groups and the Prime Minister where they wanted abortion on demand and research on safe birth control for both men and women. They also wanted 24-hour daycare services sponsored by the government and equal pay to men. Before going to Ottawa, the women gathered in front of the Vancouver courthouse and had a big press conference so people would know that they were coming to Ottawa. They devised a plan where each woman had to prepare to be arrested, to spend months and a lot of money on court cases, and to risk a criminal conviction. The plan was the women would get themselves two or three at a time into the three galleries that overlook the House of Commons, They would then chain themselves to their chairs. On a signal, one woman would start to speak. When the guards went after that woman, another one would start to speak. This plan was actually successful and they gathered a lot of momentum and media, like publicity, when doing this. So I guess you could say it worked. Now that you know about the abortion caravan, it is time to look at what the movement's goal was in reproductive rights. This focuses on women's individual rights to abortion, birth control, and reproductive health care. It focuses on language of choice, emphasizing that it is a woman slash pregnant person's right to choose whether or not to have a child. The saying "my body, my choice" actually comes from this reproductive rights. These rights were especially important back then because they didn't have many rights at all when it came to reproduction. After the criminal code reforms in 1969, there actually was now access to abortion. However, it was very, very restricted. Women could get an abortion if it was performed by an accredited hospital, by a licensed physician, with the approval of at least three doctors who agreed that an abortion would be necessary for the pregnant woman's health. R.V. Morgentaler was significant in the reproductive rights in Canada because he argued an access to abortion was a human right and he disagreed with the strict conditions on these women that had access to healthcare. He was a vocal point in the Supreme Court when they decriminalized abortion, destroying the Section 251 of the Criminal Code on abortion. Before we take a look at reproductive justice, I believe understanding the concept of intersectionality is essential in comprehending what reproductive justice is. Kimberly Crenshaw says this focus on the most privileged group members marginalizes those who are multiply burdened and obscures claims that cannot be understood as resulting from discrete sources of discrimination. Kimberly Crenshaw defines intersectionality as someone in a group who is multiply burdened. This emphasizes those who are in more than one group, which is either seen as inferior or has been oppressed. Crenshaw uses black women as an example of what she means by this. Women are already seen as inferior to men, and black people are often seen as less than Caucasians. Someone that intersects between these two groups can actually face up to twice as much as the oppression is just being associated in one of the groups, for example, white women or a black man. One can even go on even further to add the intersection of a poor person or a second class citizen to even further emphasize the struggles these people would face if they intersected between all three of these categories. Okay, now we'll talk about reproductive justice and what significance it has to do with the documentary. So during the documentary, at the end, Pierre Trudeau actually visited some women who were part of the caravan. These women expressed their inequalities of reproductive rights. They explained that rich women could easily get an abortion now, but poor women couldn't. Trudeau responded with, "So?" That struck a big worry among the females. And this leads us to the present day while we're fighting for social justice as well as reproductive rights, forming reproductive justice. Reproductive justice is the combination of social justice and reproductive rights. The reading on the Asian communities for reproductive justice defines it as the complete physical, mental, spiritual, political, social, and economic well being of women and girls based on the full achievement and protection of women's rights. This quote points out the social aspects of reproductive rights. It is good to have the rights put into place. However, it is pointless if everyone doesn't have equal access to them. It goes further than just having the rights to reproduce, but to have a child in a safe and healthy condition to which they wish to raise their child in. We can take the case of Miss G, for example. As we learned from the lecture, she was a pregnant woman with an addiction. The court attempted to breach her reproductive rights and justice by forcing her into rehabilitation. They attempted to dictate if she would deliver the baby or not, where the baby was to be raised, and other things, but it was later overturned. This is similar to when Dargo Dunn in the documentary explained how not having control over her body infuriated her, causing her to join the caravan. In the end, Ms. G made the decision in her on her own to go to rehab, deliver her child, and send him to school, where he actually later graduated and became successful. It goes to show that the power of giving someone the freedom to choose what is best for what is the best possible situation is for her and her baby. To conclude this presentation, I want to ask the question, what should be the focus now? I ask this because there has been a large increase of social injustice over the past few decades, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement picking up tremendous traction this year. I chose this documentary because I believe the focus has to be switched to reproductive justice in order to protect those who face intersection between multiply burdened groups. The caravan and reproductive rights was a good stepping stone in order to face the deeper issues, which is to get everyone equal access to the rights women have to reproduce or not to reproduce. Thank you for listening.